Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my Friday reads for May 3rd, 2019, which I'm getting out on a Saturday because that's my MO around here. So the first book I finished this week was a reread. This is The Un-Americans by Moly Antopol. It's a short story collection that my book club chose to read this month. And to be honest, I didn't actually reread all of the stories. I ran out of time before my book club started. But it was an interesting experience. I remember the first three stories being very compelling. Our group leader called them really grim, which I guess is true, and I tend to be really drawn to them. But the premises of each were very different. The first short story takes place, and the protagonist is an elderly man of Polish-Jewish descent living in New York City who marries a younger Polish woman who was a recent immigrant and recently lost her husband, and you can tell through the story that she's not really over it yet. The second story takes place in Israel on a moshav, and it's also modern day, but the protagonist is a young man who is serving in the army, but his position is relatively nondescript. He's a driver for someone, whereas meanwhile his brother was much more of a soldier boy, as it were, and had just recently returned from service in Hebron, and is just sort of the favorite and happy-go-lucky great guy, and then he has a really bad accident, and for a little while the younger brother becomes the hero of the family because he actually gets him to the hospital and saves his life. Although most of the story is really about the changing relationships between these two brothers, because their situations have changed so much, and you can really feel for the older brother, you know, because he has suffered a grievous loss in this story and has to sort of re-evaluate himself. And then the third story, well, it takes place in modern day, but it mostly is told about the Holocaust. It's this grandmother addressing the second-person granddaughter, telling about her story of being in the resistance. But it's not like, you know, all flash and heroics. It's really about the gruesomeness and how, you know, this sort of existence can make you really lose your humanity. Those were the three opening stories, and one thing that the group focused on, because I think a question in our questionnaire focused on it, was the similarities between the story that the grandmother told, where she's actually telling her granddaughter the brutal truth about what her life was like, versus the next story, which is about a middle-aged man who was from a communist country, I think Ukraine, and he was a dissident and spoke out against the government when he lived there, and you know, was tortured for information, but, you know, remained quiet about it and didn't turn anyone in. And then later he and his wife got to America, and he was a minor celebrity and an academic for a long time, but it sort of petered out once communism died, and and he was sort of a nobody now. And meanwhile now his daughter has grown up and become a playwright and wrote a story about his life, and he's kind of terrified because he was actually a pretty bad father. But the similarity between this and the Holocaust story is that he ends up telling his daughter stories that are kind of lies about his life to try to make him look better in her eyes. So there was an interesting juxtaposition between the two stories about, you know, telling a descendant the truth versus telling them lies, and why you would do that. So I like that. I don't necessarily think there was a lot of themes other than loneliness in these stories, but I really like them. Next, I finished Save Me the Waltz by Zelda Fitzgerald, which I really have to take back to the library immediately. So that's why I actually ended up reading this a little quicker than I thought, because my my time ran out sooner than I hoped, and somebody put a hold on it. But anyway, this is Zelda Fitzgerald's only novel. It's usually put in tandem with Fitzgerald's Tender is the Night. I'm sure this is the minority opinion, but I like this better than most of Fitzgerald's novels, I think, other than The Great Gatsby, which is head and shoulders above the rest. But this is a story which is also autobiographical, like a lot of Fitzgerald's were, about a woman, Alabama Beggs, who marries a man, David Knight, who are stand-ins for the Fitzgeralds, and she goes from being a vivacious youth to traveling with her husband to Paris and wanting to make a life for herself and deciding to try ballet and sort of putting her body through the ringer, trying to do ballet and defining herself that way while her husband gets famous from his painting rather than his writing. And I just feel like maybe it's because of the female focus or something, or that I felt like her story was much more approachable. I think more than the female focus, I think that Fitzgerald's characters were so inside their own heads, and Alabama in this story did a lot more action, and things were a lot more, you know, straightforward and chronological in timeline, and so I really liked it. I felt like sometimes the story had trouble with time and it jumped forward in time and I'm like, wait, what happened? And there wasn't a smooth transition. But I felt like I followed it better than I did in Fitzgerald's other novels. I just felt like it was more compelling. Maybe it was sort of worse in terms of characterization. Although, I mean, one thing that stood out to me was the young girl Bonnie. It had much more dimension, I think, than any of the children in Fitzgerald's novels. Maybe she could have gone deeper into introspection, or maybe the romanticism of Fitzgerald's novels are a bigger deal than what she was doing here, but I actually think I like this better. And also, I've only gotten a little bit into the biography, but I could tell from the courtship scenes what she took from her own life. So that was something. But yeah, I'm glad I read this. So yeah, speaking of the biography, I still am at the very beginning of Zelda, a biography by Nancy Milford. I'd hoped to read this before starting her novel, but that's not how things came to pass. But now I'm hoping to finish this weekend. We'll see how I do, but you know, it's a new month and I got lots more to read, but I am so far very taken by her story. I think I just need the time to sit down and finish it. And finally, what's next on the docket for me is ARIEL SAMSON, Freelance Rabbi by MaNishtana. This is a novel that I most recently talked about in my book haul for April, which I'll link down below. The last 2 minutes of the book haul are actually a montage of Capitol Hill and East City Bookshop that I filmed on Independent Bookstore Day, so it was a lot of fun. And anyway, this book is also semi-autobiographical about a black Orthodox rabbi and basically what it means to straddle those worlds. And I chose it for my Jewish fiction published in 2018 reading list because of its diversity. I mean, all of the books that I chose are about diverse themes, and this encompasses one that is different than anything I've read before. I don't think I've read about the black Jewish experience before, so I'm excited for that. And it also was a finalist for debut fiction in the National Jewish Book Awards, so huzzah! So that about covers it for me now, though Saturday is the 4th of May, which is a special day in Star Wars history, so I was thinking of doing a video about that, which I have planned out. I just need to film it and produce it. I hope to get it out this weekend sometime. Anyway, happy May. I hope that some of you are enjoying nicer weather. It's certainly getting a bit warmer in the Silver Spring, Maryland / DC area. So I hope you enjoy the weather, or at least I hope you enjoy your reading. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you next time.